Australia September is coming soon, and it's run by the booktuber you are currently looking at. So I thought I'd give you a mega list of book recommendations. Today there's not going to be a lot of depth in my reviews, they're just going to be rapid so I can fit more into this video. Let's start with Craig Silvey, and he's got a nice backlist of works that you can enjoy if you like his writing. But my favourite book of his is Honeybee. A young person explores their gender identity, their love of cooking, drag, and their relationship with their mother. They run away from home after their mother's new boyfriend insists that they be a real man, cut off their hair, and is a general abusive psychopath towards them. Not because Sam is trans, but more because Sam is femme. Sam forms an unlikely friendship with an older man after they both consider jumping off a bridge at the same time. Instead of forming a suicide pact, Victor offers Sam a place to live. Sam also makes friends with a chubby brown girl that lives in the neighborhood and talks a lot, and a drag queen called Fella Fitzgerald. Sylvie has also written Jasper Jones. Trigger warning for this one, Sylvie tries to depict the racism and homophobia that is within 1960s Australia in a way that is very, very accurate, but he is not a member of those communities. This one is an older book of his. Attitudes and education levels have changed since his writing of this. This is a book about a girl who is murdered, about Jasper Jones, her lover and assumed killer, and a collection of children living within this local community, learning that their parents are maybe not as perfect as they thought they were. This book is very dark, it's very full of racism, sexism and classism, coming of age, and it really captures a moment in time of Australia's community perfectly. Lastly, Sylvie has written Runt, a middle grade novel about a dog who wins a local dog agility contest and his child trainer, and her attempt to win the World Dog Agility Contests in London, and the prize money that would save her parents' farm from being repossessed by the bank. This is just hilarious and heartwarming. It is the definition of a good middle grade novel that adults will also enjoy. Tony Birch is an Indigenous author living in Melbourne who also has Irish and Afghan blood in his body. He has 10 works including novels, short story collections and poetry. The book I am going to recommend is called The White Girl. This is a story of a black woman and her 13-year-old white granddaughter who she is looking after. The authorities are looking for light-skinned Indigenous folk. While it's never explicitly stated, it is a clear reference to the stolen generation. This book is about Aboriginal communities, Aboriginal families, their love and the horrible institutionalized racism they faced then and still face today. Another book that discusses the issues of institutionalization is Victorian authors Jennifer Downes' 2022 Miles Franklin winning masterpiece Bodies of Light. This is a book about a mother accused of murdering her children, but it also tackles abuse within an institutionalized setting. For 95% of people who have ever read this novel, this is the darkest, saddest, most miserable and depressing book they have ever read. What Downes has done amazingly is show you those levels of mistreatment and the confusion between abusive relationships and love. Absolutely miserable and heartbreaking. Another miserable and heartbreaking book that also won the Miles Franklin Award is Too Much Lip by Melissa Lucenko, an Indigenous author from Queensland. A black woman returns home after not speaking to her family for almost 20 years to farewell her dying grandmother. She shacks up with a white man and her family history starts to unravel. This tackles some really dark issues, but there's also a metaphor about land rights running through this novel. After those last two novels, you might want something a little less serious, and Genevie Novak's No Hard Feelings is hilarious. This is the funniest book I read last year. A messy girl novel meets romantic comedy about Penny, who is overworked, overwhelmed, underachieving and out of luck. But I think that's a terrible description of the book. In fact, it may even be stolen from the blurb. This book has the Aussie Take the piss out of your mates with love, sense of humour running through it. Complete with a well-meaning heckler at the romantic climax of this novel. I am very surprised to learn that Novak is a journalist and a writer, and not a comedian and a writer. As a side note, I intend to read Novak's second novel, Crushing, during September. Diana Reid has quickly earned the label the Australian Sally Rooney, a boring cliched title that is not entirely inaccurate. Love and Virtue is a coming-of-age novel about a competitive female friendship. It's about consent, sex, friendship with toxic men, Me Too, class divide, campus rape culture, and moving to the city for uni. It is easy to say that rape is wrong, but are women obligated to warn other women if it means confronting their trauma before they are ready? Reid has also written Seeing Other People, which is a fantastic novel about sisters being queer, being straight, messy relationships, coming of age, and asking if queer people need to come out or if we need to stop assuming heteronormativity. It is a good book. I really do recommend it, but if you haven't read Diana Reid yet and you're only going to read one novel, it really needs to be Love and Virtue. All That's Left Unsaid by Tracy Lewin is about a Vietnamese family whose oldest son is murdered in a busy restaurant on a night out to celebrate finishing school, and nobody saw it. The boy's sister investigates the murder, which becomes an exploration of attitudes within the community, both the Vietnamese Australian community and the white Australian community, touching on the rise of far-right nationalism, organised crime, and Australia's only political assassination. This is a great pick for Prompt 3. As 2 is When Things Are Alive They Hum by Hannah Bent. This is about two sisters, one who has Down syndrome and is going to die from a faulty heart. Bent shows us the value that somebody with Down syndrome adds to the world, while shining a light on the mistreatment of them and bringing up ideas of consent and bodily autonomy within the medical context. This is currently my favourite novel of the year. Really big recommendations for this book. It's also set in Hong Kong, so it seems like a really good excuse to bring up Indelible City by Louisa Lim, which is a non-fiction about the history of Hong Kong from the point of view of the people who live there, and it is critical of both English and Chinese points of view and how Hong Kong has been used as a propaganda war between the two countries with little consideration given to the people there. If you're into poetry, I really recommend Charmaine Paper Talk Green's collection Nang Nuja Nang Yaga. Her poetry is divided up with things like official documents highlighting her family's past and the mistreatment of her people and other Indigenous people by the Western Australian government. This really is a collection. Individual poems don't so much stand out from the collection as add to the experience and become a piece of the puzzle and a piece of a greater picture. I think this is the best poetry collection I've ever read. Love Objects by Emily Maguire. I think this is a really underrated novel. Even within Australia, it hasn't gotten the hype that it really should have. Nick is a hoarder. Her 20-year-old niece Lena is moving into the neighbourhood to study, and they can renew their relationship. Lena is buxom and has insecurities about her looks because of that, and also relating to a scar that she has. She is navigating dating, trusting the wrong men, and being exploited. And was that just rape? Then one day Nick falls and injures herself while changing a light bulb. She is rushed to hospital, but her hoarding habits renders her house unsafe for her to return to. Nick struggles to trust Lena to clean out her house. Meanwhile, Lena's brother has just been released from jail and needs some help getting on his feet. This sounds like a typical world-eating girl novel, but it is so much more than that. It equally asks you to be compassionate to all of its characters, and they all require compassion, not just Lena. This is a really complex novel. Wildflowers by Peggy Frew. Three sisters, a mother, a pill popper, and a chronically depressed woman all take a holiday to a remote island in Queensland to confront the younger sister about her drug habits and force her into detox. The Bass Rock by Evie Wilde, a novel about a place and all the weird and dark things that had happened there, from witchcraft to World War II romance to an alcoholic, mentally ill woman cleaning out her grandmother's belongings. Big feminist themes, dark, a bit of a love it or hate it novel, and this one's set near the Scottish town of Berwick, so it might also qualify as a Scottember book if you're doing both readathons. Cloud Street by Tim Winton is an Aussie classic for you heavy literary fiction readers out there, about two families living together under one roof. This one isn't for me because Winton includes details such as a talking pig, but if you're into that sort of weirdness, it's a very good one to catch up on if you haven't read it yet. Tim Winton has a massive backlist, and I remember reading his debut novel he wrote when he was just 17, and nothing like his later works for obvious reasons. But Lockie Len and Human Torpedo is a very silly middle grade novel about a boy who likes surfing and tries to hide his wet dreams from his mother. Another middle grade novel I liked when I was young was 2 Weeks with the Queen. Colin's brother has cancer and he's set to England to live with his cousin. Being young, he assumes the Queen will be able to help his brother, and he tries to break into Buckingham Palace and ask her. Somehow, this corresponds to him meeting a very different type of Queen, Ted, who also has a friend who has a terminal illness. Ted helps Colin understand what's happening to his brother, with the caveat that I would have been 13 or 14 when I read this. This was a very queer positive book, especially for a book written in 1989, and I don't think I've seen AIDS or cancer tackled in a book aimed at such a young audience. Morris Glitzman's other books include things such as Misery Guts, Worry Warts, or the very sagacious Bumface. A Disappearance in Fiji by Neil Morath. A murder mystery reveals the slave-like conditions of Indians tricked into moving to Fiji. This is basically just a murder mystery that talks about class, power, and gives you historical insight into Fiji during 1914. Rao is Fijian, Indian, and Australian. Another person you might not realise is Australian is Ainda Adiga. His novel The White Tiger won the Booker Prize, and it's a nice book, but I'd really prefer to recommend Amnesty, a dark comedy about Danny, a Sri Lankan man who fled Sri Lanka and was denied refugee status in Australia, but stayed on, and so is technically a illegal immigrant, a term I really despise, by the way. Danny is working as a cleaner and learns that one of his clients has been murdered. The woman's body has been disposed of in a creek that she recently visited with Danny, and he's cleaned the knife that she was murdered with. Coming forward means that he risks being deported. Staying quiet means that justice remains undone and that he may potentially be a murder suspect. A very socially critical novel. Another novel tackling Sri Lankan refugees in Australia is this year's Miles Franklin Award-winning novel, Chai Time at Cinema Gardens. This is about a nursing home, refugees, and the different types of racism they face from white Australians. If you want a book that can best be described as pure feminist rage, then The Furies by Mandy Beaumont is dark as fuck. New Animal is about a mortician who uses casual sex to deal with, well, something. She decides to fly to Tasmania to avoid the grief of a recent loss and finds herself exploring the BDSM scene. Trigger warning, this contains a scene that made me feel physically ill. And when I tell people that, I instantly realize that I need to clarify that I mean the scene with the whip and not the scene with the menstrual blood. Yeah. There's a lot going on in this book. I'm not really sure that I liked it, but it's definitely branded itself upon my memory, and it was darkly hilarious at times and quite cringy at other times, but a very love it or hate it book. Nothing But My Body by Tilly Lawson. This is a memoir of a queer sex worker. And that's really all I need to tell you about this book. Another memoir I'm recommending is Candice Bell, A Bogen Rap City. This reads like a funny, trashy bush fiction novel with a trans twist at the end. However, it's the memoir of somebody growing up in a rural Australian town, not feeling like they ever fit in and realising that they were actually a woman. Trigger warning on this one, there is the use of the N word as well as the C and the B words that have quite similar meanings to the N word, and I warn you about this because Bell style is not Indigenous. Although they are quoting, and I do believe the intent was to call out racism, that aspect of this book was not particularly well handled. Cold Enough for Snow. Now, if you're planning on reading this one, and it's fairly well known at this point, I think, I really do recommend you bookmark Sarah from Eyes on Indie's review of it. I've got to be honest with you, I didn't understand everything in this novel, and her review of it, she just explained so many things and improved my experience and my ability to analyze it to no end. It's a really good deep dive, and it's not the sort of novel that you can spoil so you can watch it before or after you read it. Guarantee you it will add to your experience. This is simply about a mother and a daughter who visit an art gallery together, and it explores their relationships and the changing roles they have within it as they both age. It's very short, and it's a novel of fleeting beauty. 100 Days by Alice Pung, a mother and daughter drama. A 16-year-old girl finds herself pregnant and trapped inside her mother's Melbourne apartment. This is a novel about when love can become abuse, about wanting to control your child and about when to let go and listen to them. It's about love and motherhood and claiming your daughter as your own. I find it very interesting how the daughter being pregnant changes our perspective of how the mother is treating her. Remember, she's just 16. Puff Piece by John Safran. This is a non-fiction book about the cigarette industry, told with Safran's Louis Theroux style sarcastic journalism. It's not the Aussie bias in me. Safran is so much better at being Louis than Louis is. Safran spends quite a lot of this book talking about how he hopes that he will be bribed by big tobacco, only to then intentionally be too naive to spot it. Also, this is a really good piece of investigative journalism. Wayward by Amelia Clark, one of the current books of the moment. 3 women all alive at different times, all the subject of oppression by the men in their lives, find ways to fight back. Sitting where literary, commercial, historical and fantasy intersect, this book doesn't just have a great plot, but it has 3 great plots. Sunbathing by Isabel Beach. This is about a woman who has just lost her father to suicide. She's dealing with grief and trauma. She's guilty and worried that she wasn't enough for him to live for. She visits friends that are getting married in Italy, and she lives a simple but restorative life with them. Just a stunningly beautiful book about the process of realizing what is important in life, healing, depression and self-love. A book that I think could equally be described as depressing and miserable or uplifting and happy. And the last book that I want to recommend is Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. I know I wanted to save a big novel for last. One of the funniest books I have ever read. This is about mental illness, the stigma attached to that and the importance of diagnosis. It's about Martha, whose husband Patrick is leaving her, and we go back and we see the events that lead up to that. What I think is so fantastically done in this novel is the creation of Martha as the person who the whole room wants to talk to, that likable and charismatic character who is also horrible. I really deeply understood why Patrick fell for her, and I equally understood why he wanted to leave her. It's a real triumph of writing to get us to appreciate such conflicting emotions and opinions about one character. That's over 30 books. Hopefully there is something for you on that list, but there are literally thousands of other books written by Aussies out there, so let me know your favourite book. Hit all the nice buttons and all that good stuff for my channel, please. Bye bye.